All right, so we back again with another reading of The Young Lords by Johanna. Uh, uh, how y'all say her last name? I always do. I know Captain.
Oh, yeah, Fernandez.
Fernandez. That's what I think I be saying Ferdinand's or sometimes. Fernandez, Johanna Fernandez, The Young Lords of Radical History. We've been reading this for the past several weeks, probably about like 2 months now, or close to it. Been a pretty good read, learning about different aspects of the Young Lords, Puerto Rico. I think everybody been enjoying this read, so I'm glad that we could be back on here this Friday reading it again with all the comrades. Pleasure to have everybody on today. As always, we're going to start off with the Statement of Unity. Statement of Unity is important so we understand like why we came together and formed this second Rainbow Coalition. So with that said, if Comrade Gabby could screen share that and start reading that for us.
Right on. Can y'all see this?
Yep.
Right on. As always, I'll begin reading the Statement of Unity preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to quote-unquote reservations, concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the ego sunk its claws with other nations, making war on Mexico and grabbing its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them into colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the imperialist power of the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military intervention, and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As European Union stated, we have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world, of every ethnicity or nationality, face a common enemy that's destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life. Food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from the oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably. Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriots organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses have developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight back against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways or on particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Sherman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, said that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a quote-unquote race struggle. He said that the class struggle, goddammit. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire present forces of the state, police, courts, jails, prisons, intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021 with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the United Front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriot Organization, and all other original Rainbow Coalition members, we established our pragmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist and fearless ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and class interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All members of the coalition, New African Black Panther Party, White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, NASL, North Alabama School for Organizers, New Era Young Lords, and American Indian Movement Northeast Woodland Chapter. The 6 disciplinary rules. Number 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4, members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5, members will not act as informers nor be against the purposes of the Rainbow Coalition, of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And number 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. And that is the statement of unity.
All right, appreciate that, comrade.
Right on.
Would you be able to screen share the PDF?
If not, I can.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, if you can.
Okay. Just a second here.
And we'll be starting. If you got the book, it's on page 239. Starting with the subs. It's the subsection we're gonna be reading called "A Hybrid Experience of Race."
Just a second here. I've got to scroll to that section. Okay. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep. And if you turn y'all screen, y'all be able to see it even better. And y'all can pitch it to make it pinch it with your fingers to make it bigger or smaller on your screen. All right. So I'm gonna kick it off. A hybrid experience of race. At the First Spanish United Methodist Church, the Young Lords had staged a striking vision of a new world that elicited both marvel and unease among many who witnessed it. The diverse racial and ethnic composition of the new world captured the interest of the city's major Spanish newspaper, El Diario La Prensa. The papers carefully crafted description of the Young Lords presented their mingling of races as a new practice by a younger generation of Puerto Ricans in the city. Quote, these young men and women, Puerto Ricans, some white, others of the black race, and among them some Americans, love the idea of independence for Puerto Rico. They ascertained that they form part of a coalition with the Black Panther Party and the Young Patriots, unquote. While the article was sympathetic to the Young Lord's idealistic call for liberation of the oppressed, its discomfort was evident in the labor description of the group's racial makeup. The Young Lords was a far cry from the older island-born, disproportionately white or light-skinned political leadership that most Puerto Ricans were accustomed to seeing. By contrast, is the one-time Young Lord Attorney General Gerardo Rivera observed, quote, the Lords were a different complexion, younger, darker, primarily English-speaking and mainland-born, unquote. Within the Puerto Rican community of the 1960s, experimental differences between younger and older generations aroused competing perspectives on the issues of race. The editors of the El Diario La Prensa regularly expressed the most traditional or rigid view of the matter. 3 months before it covered the Young Lord's occupation of the People's Church, the newspaper vehemently declared its opposition to efforts by Black American and Puerto Rican student activists and faculty at various campuses of the city, University of New York, to combine Black American and Puerto Rican study programs into one ethnic studies department. An editorial read, in part, quote, historically, culturally, psychologically, both are totally different in origin and development. Puerto Ricans, moreover, have not lived the Black Americans' experience and cannot identify with it, unquote. This disconsonant with the era's shift in consciousness, this unabashed and absolute rejection of Puerto Ricans' common experience with Black Americans did not make references to race, but concealed a social distancing energized by racism. The maneuver was a projection of a distinctive Latin American expression of racism and race ideology, different from that which emerged in the United States. Cohered over centuries of Spanish colonial rule and reinforced by the nation building projects that swept through the continent in the late 19th century, race ideology in Latin America had tolerated, codified, and promoted race mixing or mestizaje. Mestizaje.
Mesti Mestizaje.
Yeah, mestizaje. A strategy of domination for erasing and depoliticizing Black and Indigenous resistance. Achieved variously through education, class mobility, or genetic mixing, the ideology of mestizaje promoted the lightening of the population, erasing its presence of Black people and their culture, and denied the existence of racism in these Latin American societies. In Puerto Rico, for example, where Afro descendants made up conservatively 20% of the population, Puerto Rican society has historically denied or minimized the presence and influence of Black people, Black culture, and Black aesthetics. In the continental United States, the view expressed in the newspaper's editorial reflected the long-standing trend among newcomers to distance themselves from Black Americans to protect their own tenuous standing and their chances at upward mobility. The statement echoed long-standing prejudices, but it did not reflect the complexity of the experience brought on by the changing pattern of Puerto Rican migration and settlement during the 20th century. The sentiment was likely held by many who settled in New York during the first decades of the 20th century. This wave of Puerto Rican migrants merged their political interests and identities with the city's Spanish-speaking enclave. That pre-existing community self-identified as Hispanic, a term that denotes European ancestry. And Spaniards and their small businesses and civic organizations made up its majority. But Cuban and Latin American immigrants made a home there too. With a combined population of merely 0.7% of New York residents, this community's small size and the language barrier alone created an insular experience, even amongst its Spanish-dominant, darker-hued newcomers. El Dario's proclamation did not reflect the lived experience of Black Puerto Ricans, who, despite their diverse perspectives of themselves, have been historically construed as Black Americans in public square and treated accordingly. In the late 19th century, for example, the Afro-Puerto Rican bibliophile Arturo Stromberg turned the conundrum into a lifelong identification and pursuit of common cause with Black Americans. By contrast, the socialist writer Jesus Colon, who settled in New York during World War I, quote, saw himself as a Puerto Rican man who happened to be Black, unquote. The editorial's assertion also lagged behind reality by at least 30 years. By the 1930s, Puerto Ricans made up 17.9% of the amalgam of Spanish-speaking people in the city. In a country defined by the politics and economy of race, the increase of this population of Afro-descended people could not escape notice and would have consequences for all involved. The city, Puerto Ricans, Black Americans, white New Yorkers, and other Latin American descended people. Puerto Rican post-war migration coincided with the comparably large movement of Black Southerners to the city and white flight to the suburbs. It also happened alongside the shift in the city's economy from manufacturing to service. Demographic and structural transformation propelled a process of racialization among Puerto Ricans that had been in flux until then. During the Depression years, for example, Puerto Ricans had been grouped racially with Black Americans and perceived as biologically inferior, dependent, and diseased. In the post-war period, however, their hardships and troubles have been compared sympathetically to those of European immigrants before them. They had also been simultaneously dispersed as undeserving outsiders incapable of self-rule who were taking away jobs, burdening the city, and prone to criminal activity. But beginning in the late 1960s, the racialization of Puerto Ricans began to cohere. They began to be identified as dark racial foreigners, distinct from Black Americans, predisposed to delinquency and violence. Their close proximity to Black Americans surely didn't help. As discussed earlier in 1960, the consensus reported that Puerto Ricans and Black Americans were more or less equally divided demographically in East Harlem, comprising 40.4 and 38.2% of the population, respectively. Their growing demonization in public discourse mirrored the indignities they suffered in government bureaucracies and hospitals at the hands of school staff and the police. That many Puerto Ricans suffered these indignities alongside Black Americans in the age of civil rights provoked a reckoning with Blackness that radically transformed their perception of their neighbors and themselves. The experience was finally captured in 1967 in the best-selling memoir, Down These Mean Streets. Piri Thomas' searing portrait of poverty and racism growing up Puerto Rican and Black in East Harlem. Although not inevitable, the rise of the Young Lords and their dynamic demographic composition reflected the social reorganization of post-war Puerto Rican life. Compared to the disproportionately white leaders of other Puerto Rican organizations, the Young Lords' formal leadership body, the Central Committee, had a darker racial makeup. The majority, 3 out of 5 members, were Afro-Puerto Ricans. 2 of the 5, Juan Gonzalez and David Perez, was fair-skinned Puerto Ricans who, absent their last names, might have passed for Italian American. The other 3, Felipe, Luciano, Pablo, Yoruba Guzman, and Juan F. Ortiz, was unequivocally Black. At first sight, their afro, skin color, facial features made them indistinguishable from Black Americans. The same was true of the Young Lords membership. The racial profile of the leadership drew a disproportionate number of Afro-Puerto Ricans into the group's ranks. Historically, many Afro-Puerto Ricans struggled to define themselves as the margins of two cultures with competing ideologies of race forged under very different social and historical conditions. They knew Puerto Ricans' anti-Blackness intimately, but they were also painfully familiar with their Black American friends' summary dismissal of Puerto Rican claims to language and ethnicity as fundamental markers of self-definition. For many members, the Young Lords provided a place to feel understood for the first time in the field that they belong. Pablo Guzman articulated the experience of a segment of second and third generation Puerto Rican migrants powerful when he wrote in Palante, quote, "Before people called me a spick, they called me a nigger," unquote. The experience had been documented by Puerto Ricans as early as the 19th century during their first significant migration wave to New York. In the main, they forged middle-class mutual aid cultural organizations alongside Cuban Afro descendants living in New York that emphasized individual uplift, national solidarity, and diasporic unity among people of African descent. New and emerging in the 1960s, however, was a conscious public campaign embraced by the Young Lords and others to transform the racial consciousness of Puerto Ricans by celebrating Afro-Puerto Rican identity and analyzing the historic roots of racial prejudice within Puerto Rican society. Their message also called for Puerto Rican and Black American unity on the basis of a common experience of racism, colonial oppression, poverty, and working class exploitation. Black Americans also joined the Young Lords. Leading members of the organization estimate that Black Americans made up between 25 and 30% of the group's membership. The organization's Black leadership and fair share of Afro-Puerto Ricans appealed to Black Americans, as did its deliberate conceptualization of itself as a sister organization to the Black Panther Party, the era's boldest expression of organized Black resistance. The political disarray into which the Black Panthers fell precisely at the moment when the Young Lords emerged also propelled Black American membership in the Young Lords. But the basis of the group's cross-ethnic membership was rooted in the experience of everyday life. The hybridity, yeah, of experience between Black Americans and Puerto Ricans were anchored materially in their shared post-war migration patterns. Felipe Luciano hints at the common rural experience which fueled identity convergences between many Black Americans and Puerto Ricans. The Blacks that we were dealing with came from the three states: Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. The ones I knew were rural. They were from Charleston, Savannah, Beaufort. When we came in, we were Hibaros too.
Jibaros. Yep.
Hibaros too. We dressed in red shoes, green pants, and we would come to New York without coats. They gave us coats. They gave us food. These were the people who fed us, who nurtured us. So the relationship, while strained because of race, was tremendously intimate in terms of love. In spite of racial differences, there came an attraction. Common lived experience puts Black Americans and Puerto Ricans together, but lived in an urban environment. Both lived in an urban environment where poverty was qualitatively different than before, marked by economic restructuring and structural unemployment, combined with the shared experience of police brutality in the streets and the various forms of racism took in northern cities. Reflecting on their shared interests, Luciano continues, quote, "We were living in bad housing. We were oppressed by the police. Institutionally, we were discriminated against. We had objective empirical issues that we had to fight together. Even white Puerto Ricans were affected by that. Therefore, their natural partners had to be Blacks," unquote. As discussed in chapter 2, common traumatic schooling experiences laid the groundwork for cross-ethnic collaboration, particularly in the face of white backlash against integration in the late 1960s. Even before she joined the Young Lords, the fair-skinned Iris Morales regularly joined Black radical organizations in high school and in college. The emphasis on race and class in the Young Lord campaigns made involvement of Black Americans inevitable. But before finding widespread political expression in the 1960s, the common currents between the groups could be heard in music. Black American and Puerto Rican migrants forged a dynamic post-war urban culture during the decades they worked, studied, and created alongside each other despite the ethnic differences. As noted by the late sociologist and cultural theorist Juan Flores, quote, Black Americans and Puerto Ricans in New York have been partying together for many years. Since the musical revolution of the late 1940s, when musical giants like Mario Basa, Machito, and Dizzy Gillespie, Gillespie joined forces in the creation of the Cubop or Latin jazz. Gilbert Colon, a self-identified Latino young lord, was introduced early to dance scenes by his parents and aunt, who were regulars at the Palladium, New York's legendary Latin music ballroom. His parents were part of an earlier wave of immigrants and migrants from Cuba and Puerto Rico who settled in New York in the 1920s. Cologne recalls that the party he frequented played rhythm and blues as well as salsa, and even WBLS, the flagship Black music radio station in New York, quote, played salsa sometimes, unquote. He also notes that white people, quote, white people, specifically a lot of the Jewish people, were also into salsa and dancing. You would have Black and Puerto Rican women dancing with white men and vice versa. So on the sociological level, there was a level of interaction that was allowed in that setting that you didn't see elsewhere, unquote. While Cologne embraced the Latin rhythms of his parents' generation, others, such as the fair-skinned young Lord Carlito Rovira, found refuge in Black urban culture and rejected their Puerto Rican identity and ethnicity. Quote, I was alienated because I knew I wasn't Black or white, but I felt an affinity for Black culture, unquote, Rovira says. Quote, I was listening to Motown. We were taking our cues from African Americans. We were dressing like them, dancing like them, talking like them. Meanwhile, my father was listening to Trio Mayari, and he wasn't too happy about what I was gravitating to culturally, unquote. Black American Denise Oliver was among those immersed in the rich culture overlaps between Black and Spanish Harlem. And his recollections of those years, Felipe Luciano remembers, quote, Denise loved Latin music, danced her pants off, had an affinity for a culture that was African, but had another patina to it. That is, she understands the African nature of Puerto Rican society when Puerto Ricans didn't, unquote. Of the organic manifestations of intercultural solidarity that came to define an emerging Rican identity in the 1960s, Luciano says, quote, Puerto Ricans kept a nugget of their culture and their aesthetic deep within them, but the relationship that they developed with Black people were so deep and so loving and so contradictory and so immense that it developed a new culture, and you can hear it in the music. Blacks and Puerto Ricans in New York, when you say the word, it already connotes a whole experience, unquote. It was in this context that the experience of a generation reared in a moment of racial solidarity gave shape to Boogaloo, which combined rhythm and blues and soul traditions with Afro-Cuban and Puerto Rican musical idioms. Boogaloo became hugely popular among both groups with Joe's, Cuba's Bang Bang, and Pete Rodriguez. I like it like that. The same cultural moment will also give birth to a more explicit shift among a younger generation of Puerto Ricans. Gilbert Colon remembers, quote, the slamming house party where they played Say It Loud when it first came out, I'm Black and I'm Proud. I remember it was summertime and everybody being like, yeah, that's right. And all of the Latinos I knew who could have an afro started wearing them, unquote. It was around that time that Colon began to challenge his mother when she advised against dating a girl darker than he was. He was one of many younger Puerto Ricans toward turning towards a black identified racial consciousness. You want to take over from there, Zen?
Sure. Although Puerto Rican and Black American interactions were certainly marked by conflict and prejudice, the Young Lords were in a special position to build an explicit politics against racism and colorism within their generational cohort. Whereas in the past, Puerto Ricans and other Latinxes had sought answers to these questions as individuals or in small circles, the mass character of the Black Freedom Movement opened the possibility for a collective response to and a public engagement of the issue amongst Latinxes. By examining their own views on race, studying the origins of racial ideology in Puerto Rico and in Latin America, making it integral to their practice, and welcoming Black Americans into their ranks, the Young Lords embraced the assignment more systematically than any of their Puerto Rican contemporaries. Yet, in spite of the growing sense of Black pride among Puerto Ricans and common cause with Black Americans, prejudice and conflict abounded even within the Young Lords. Sometime in the winter of 1970, a conflict between a fair-skinned female Puerto Rican recruit and a long-standing and trusted Black American member who went by the name of Haha sharpened internal debates around prejudice and racism in the organization. A veteran who had been a prisoner of war in Korea, Haha had been politicized when the Korean army performed life-saving surgery on his brain, sparing his life on account of his race. According to Carlito Rivera, after a series of interactions with the new recruit, Haha detected that she was unconsciously afraid of him taking care of her daughter. He raised the issue publicly at a meeting, and in doing so, quote, opened up a can of worms about how Puerto Ricans had absorbed dominant racist fears about Black Americans and Black men especially, and it gave us a deeper understanding of the different ways racism is manifested, end quote. As this conversation spread through the organizations, the Young Lords responded by, quote, waging ideological struggle against these tendencies in their internal and public meetings, in their literature, and by building an organizational culture of intolerance of racism. The Young Lords' most observable intervention came in the form of analysis and political propaganda, which they disseminated through their newspaper Palante and radio program on WBAI. The newspaper was a key tool in challenging racism through political education. The many articles on the matter reflected a conscious and systematic attempt to challenge dominant ideas about race in Puerto Rico and antagonisms between Black Americans and Puerto Ricans on the mainland. Palante published articles on the character of Native American society in Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic before Spanish colonization, the nature and character of African slavery on these islands, African and Native American influences on Puerto Rico's language and culture, and African and Native American resistance to Spanish rule. The paper featured an article on the history of the Puerto Rican coastal town of Loíza, a town settled by runaway slaves from the British colonies, and the centrality of Loíza's Nigerian cultural and musical legacies to Puerto Rico's national culture and identity. Readers of the newspaper also encountered an array of articles on Black American history and the influence of Afro-Puerto Ricans on Puerto Rican politics and culture, including short biographies of Black radicals across the Americas, such as Sojourner Truth, H. Rap Brown, Malcolm X, Emeterio Betances, and the Afro-Cuban revolutionary Antonio Maceo. The young lords were determined to speak what was known but unspoken. Influenced by their own experiences as racialized others and inspired by the Black Power movement's humanistic assertion that Black is beautiful, the young lords launched an aggressive campaign of education on race ideology and racial inequality among Puerto Ricans, a fact of life that too often they felt was either avoided or denied within the Puerto Rican community. They made public a conversation about race that had been confined to hushed whispers among Puerto Ricans, who were often ignorant of the racially charged character of their comments. Writing in Palante in an article titled Puerto Rican Racism, Iris Morales took on this subject. Puerto Ricans don't like to talk about racism or admit that it exists amongst Puerto Ricans. Boricuas talk of an island that is free from racism, or they say that the American brought it in. Although the American did make it worse, racism in Puerto Rico began with the Spanish. Morales traces the origins of racism in Puerto Rico to the enslavement and exploitation in gold mines and plantations of Taino Indians and Africans. As justification for their own savagery, she argued, Spaniards depicted Tainos as savage, unchristian, and of another race, and Africans as inferior, uncivilized, and of an alien race. Unlike liberals who explained racism as a byproduct of bad ideas and lack of interaction between people of different races, the young lords, like other radicals, argued that racism was an outgrowth of the economic organization of society. Beyond theorizing racial formation in Latin America, the young lords emphasized the centrality of Southern slavery, Black American oppression, and anti-Black race ideology to the lived experience of racism in the United States. Accordingly, they affirmed the primacy of the Black American freedom struggle to the defeat of U.S. capitalism. The group also traced the impact of mainland structures of racism on all Puerto Ricans, where, quote, light-skinned Puerto Ricans started viewing themselves as white and their compatriots as Black, reflecting the practices of American society. Many say I'm American, I'm Spanish, or I'm white in order to avoid identification as Puerto Rican, end quote. The group countered by giving those who were drawn to the organization a sense of pride in their ethnicity and a sense of their humanity. They had implemented this work earlier during the church offensive, where the young lords debunked Eurocentric constructions of knowledge and highlighted the significance of people of color the world over as agents of change in history. These classes were part of the broader movement's demand for ethnic and women's studies. In their straightforward and down-to-earth manner, the young lords thus posited an analysis of the various ways in which Puerto Ricans on the mainland not only denied the existence of racism, but also denied their race, and sometimes even their Puerto Rican ethnicity, language, and heritage. They exposed the tendency, even among Afro-Puerto Ricans, to deny their color, and the known tendency among all newcomers to disassociate themselves from Black Americans to escape further exclusion. Quote, many Black Puerto Ricans cling to being Puerto Rican in order to negate their Blackness. Both Black and light-skinned Puerto Ricans adopt racist attitudes towards Afro-American brothers and sisters, end quote. In their zealous pursuit of solidarity between Puerto Rican and Black Americans, the young lords didn't always convey the complexity of Puerto Rican mainland identity. Because of Puerto Rico's long-standing colonial relationship to the United States, the identity of many Puerto Ricans has been strongly organized around cultural and political independence, defined by the idea of the nation, not by race. For Puerto Ricans living on the U.S. mainland, where the migrants experienced both exclusion and nostalgia for their homeland, their identification with the island was amplified by the revolution and ethnic pride heralded by the Black Power movement. While Puerto Rican mainland identity may have been influenced by prejudice against Black Americans, Puerto Ricans' refusal to accept a racial signifier, Black, was for some a repudiation of the singular U.S. tendency to treat race as a primary identity trait. Puerto Ricans, like most people of Latin American descent, identify cultural heritage as the primary formative element in their social identity. Reared in a setting with conceptions of race forged under Spanish rather than British colonialism, Puerto Ricans do not adhere to the U.S. mainland practice, reserved primarily for people of color, of subordinating cultural to racial identification. In fact, the United States' rigid racial discourse is the exception and not the rule in the Americas. A product of the greater exploitative character of American slavery and the legally sanctioned post-Civil War racial apartheid that developed in the United States in the late 19th century. In fact, the Young Lord's discourse on these issues, however limited, introduced new ways of seeing race through comparative analyses of race ideology as it developed under vastly different conditions in the United States and Latin America. The Young Lords introduced their lay readership to a conversation on comparative racial formations in Latin America and the United States that was until then restricted to academia. In the same article discussed above, Morales explained, in the United States, the formula for racism says, one drop of black blood makes you black. As a result, Puerto Ricans as a mixed people are considered blacks, and all Puerto Ricans become victims of U.S. racism. Quote. Although the racial experience of mainland Puerto Ricans was more complicated, often varying widely depending on a person's skin color and language, the Young Lords labored to understand historical conditions in Latin America, where imperial decline and the vast demographic advantage of Indians and slaves produced a different race ideology. Expounding further on the different conception of race forged under Spanish colonialism in Puerto Rico and the origins of racism in Latin America, Morales explained, quote, according to them, one drop of white blood meant you were white and better than your black compatriot. Acceptance was given according to the degree of whiteness, end quote. She goes on to link the construction of race identity within the context of Spanish rule to the, quote, axiom of life in Puerto Rico and in Latin America. Quote, que me curar
You want me to read that?
raza.
Oh, sorry.
Puerto Ricans believe that to better the race, you must marry a light-skinned Puerto Rican. Like many radicals before them, including the Puerto Rican socialist Jesus Colon, the Young Lords also argued that racism was the primary ideological tool used by capitalists to sow divisions among working people of all races to preclude a collective uprising by people at the bottom of society. They explained that while Black Americans and Puerto Ricans were, quote, taught that the other is inferior and to be avoided or hated, end quote, both suffered under similar oppressive social conditions in terms of unemployment, a disproportionate vulnerability to the draft and drug abuse, and poor health care, housing, and education. Of divisions among the poor and working class, they wrote, quote, we have been divided and conquered by the enemy in hundreds of ways. Housewives against prostitutes, young against old, men against women, Puerto Ricans against Afro-Americans, unionized workers against non-union workers, workers against drug addicts, families against other families, one Arabal against another. These contradictions should be settled so that we can unite against the enemy, end quote. However, unlike that of socialists and communists of the 1930s, the Young Lords' worldview was influenced not just by Marxism, but by the theoretical frameworks of anti-imperialist writers like Frantz Fanon and Albert Memmi, among others. They were part of a rising cadre of radicals of color who emphasized the fallout of the colonial project on colonial subjects in the form of an alienated consciousness of inferiority and dependency. As a means of building an anti-racist culture and consciousness, the Young Lords institutionalized their analysis of racism formally with the publication of their pamphlet, Ideology of the Young Lords Party, which members were required to read and master. Excuse me a second, I need to get a drink.
Sister Zen, I was just gonna say, if you have any trouble reading anything in Spanish, I could read it for you.
That's okay, thank you though. A section of the pamphlet defined, quote, colonized mentality as the kinds of uncritical, racially derogatory remarks expressed in day-to-day life among Puerto Ricans and the oppressed. Quote, that black is bad and ugly and dirty, that kinky hair is pelo malo, that we call Black Puerto Ricans names like Prieto, Muleto, and Cotolo, end quote. This anti-Black racism among colonized subjects was kind of was a kind of false consciousness in the Marxist sense, meant to disorient people who share common objective interests. Quote, the colonizers divide us up, teach us to fight against each other, because as long as we fight against each other, we won't deal with our real problems, slavery, hunger, and misery. We are so brainwashed by the newspapers we read, the books they write for us, the television, the radio, the schools, and the church, that we don't know what our real thoughts are anymore. We're afraid to be leaders because we are taught to be followers. We are told that we cannot exist without Americans in Puerto Rico, and we believe it, even though we know that our nation existed for hundreds of years without them. All of this brainwashing, this colonized mentality, holds us back from our liberation. End quote. The organization's analysis of how the dominant ideas of society are replicated in schools, the media, and the church suggests that its members may have been among the early readers of Louis Althusser, whose critique and writings on ideology, such as Ideology and Ideological State Apparatuses, were in the air and later anchored new fields of inquiry in the academy, such as postmodernism and critical race theory in the 1980s. Whether they were conscious of it or not, the young lords had a more pliable understanding of race and identity than Black Americans. Despite their self-proclaimed Puerto Rican nationalism, one of their major publications identifies the Young Lords Party as a, quote, party of Afro-Americans and Puerto Ricans, a statement that a predominantly Black American organization with Puerto Rican members would have been hard-pressed to proclaim. Because of the openness of the group and its genuine commitment to building coalitions among people of color, it attracted an ethnically and racially diverse membership. Beyond its Black American membership of approximately 25%, another 5 to 8% were non-Puerto Rican Latinos, among them Cubans, Dominicans, Panamanians, and Colombians. A significant number were also radicals with bicultural backgrounds whose parents were Cuban and Puerto Rican, Black American and Puerto Rican, and in the case of young Lord Rafael Vieira, Kenyan and Puerto Rican. In addition to shifting the relationship between whites and people of color in the United States, the New Left, of which the Young Lords were a part, also transformed the racial identities of people of color and the relationships among them. The change was incubated in a historical understanding of the origins and fallout of racism in the Americas. The Young Lords literature, radio program on WBAI, and militant organizing popularized and contributed greatly to this theorization from below of race. In addition, the mingling of people of color from different backgrounds infused the organization with a sense of joy and freedom as they built within their ranks a microcosm of the bold new society emblazoned in their 13-point program. Kwame, is this where we're stopping today, or are we reading this other section too?
Yeah, that's where we're stopping at. I appreciate that, comrade.
Right
welcome.
on.
I think I want to go back to this one part, because this what makes the Young Lords such a great case study of history, where we start dealing with the colonized mind. You dig what I'm saying? And at the part of the bottom of 248, I just want to read this over one time just to put emphasis on it. It says, as a means of building anti-racist culture and consciousness, the Young Lords institutionalized their analysis of racism formally with the publication of their pamphlet, Ideology of the Young Lords Party, which members were required to read and master. A section of the pamphlet defined as colonized mentality as a kind of uncritical, racially derogatory remarks expressed in day-to-day life among Puerto Ricans and the oppressed. Quote, it says that black is bad and ugly and dirty, that kinky hair is pelo malo, that we call black Puerto Ricans names like Prieto, Moleto, and Cola, unquote. The anti-black racism among colonized subjects was a kind of false consciousness in the Marxist sense, meant to disorient people who share common objective interests. Quote, the colonizers divide us up, teach us to fight against each other, because as long as we fight against each other, we won't deal with our real problems, slavery, hunger, and misery. We are so brainwashed by the newspapers we read, the books we write, they write for us, the television, the radio, the schools, the church, that we don't know what our real thoughts are anymore. Think about that. We don't know what our thoughts are anymore. We are afraid to be leaders because we are taught to be followers. We are told that we cannot exist without Americans and Puerto Ricans. We believe it, even though we know that our nation existed for hundreds of years without them. All of this brainwashing, this colonized mentality holds us back from our liberation. I thought that was a very powerful thing. That was required reading. You know what I'm saying, for them, and that helped them to build the solidarity and the pride. You know what I'm saying, of loving themselves. You know what I'm saying. I think it was just like, and I know we talked about this when we read over my autobiography. It's just like how I felt growing up. Like I had an inferiority complex. Like I thought that black people was just slaves and we ain't accomplished shit, but that the civil rights, like nothing beyond slavery. Like history started with slavery and ended with the civil rights. That's all I knew coming up. You know what I'm saying? And when all these social institutions reinforce this, from the schools, from the churches, from the television, from the radio, from the, all across the board, the television, like it keeps this colonized mentality that we project and internalize on each other. Think about that. Like this why I like these type of discussions, because I hear black people say all the time, oh, well, Chicano people, brown people, Puerto Rican people, they're more united than us, comrade. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm a part of a coalition of people that we talk about this type of shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then I've heard white people talk about, or even some of my some brown comrades I've met over the years and stuff, but like, well, black people, it seems like y'all got y'all stuff together. Y'all more united. Like when the police kill y'all, y'all rally together. Da, da, da. And I'm like, nah, it's a whole lot of internal shit that goes on with us. Like we have a lot of colonialized ways of thinking. Like we still have colorism where people think just because you're lighter skinned that you are somehow in a better station in life, or you're somehow better, or a woman that's light skinned is aesthetically more beautiful than a sister that's dark skinned. Like we deal with all that shit. You know what I'm saying? But we have to have these conversations so we understand where all this stuff comes from, and that it's not just monopolized by one community. You know what I'm saying? I want to before I open it up to everybody, I want to read this passage from Malcolm X. I'm pretty sure everybody heard this before. This is his speech he gave. And this why Malcolm X was a big influence, not only on the Black Panther Party, but as we was reading in this book, on the Young Lords. The Young Lords was very much influenced by Malcolm X. But this is where all this shit comes from. You know what I'm saying? That's why I think Malcolm played a big role in helping there to be a Black Panther Party, to there being a Young Lords. You know what I'm saying? He said, what impact does what happens to them have upon us? Number one, you have to realize that up until 1959, Africa was dominated by the colonial powers, having complete control over Africa. The colonial powers of Europe projected the image of Africa negatively. They always projected Africa in a negative light. Jungle savages, cannibals, nothing civilized. Why then? Why naturally it was so negative that it was negative to you and me? And you and I began to hate it. We didn't want anybody telling us anything about Africa, much less calling us African. And hating Africa and hating the Africans, we end up hating ourselves without even realizing it. Because you can't hate the roots of a tree and not hate the tree. You can't hate your origin and not end up hating yourself. You can't hate Africa and not hate yourself. He said, show me one of these people over here who have been thoroughly brainwashed and has a negative attitude towards Africa. And I'll show you one who has a negative attitude towards himself. You can't have a positive have a positive towards yourself and a negative attitude towards Africa at the same time. To the same degree that your understanding of and attitude towards becomes positive, you'll find that your understanding of your towards yourself will also become positive. You know, he said, I want to read further on because he makes such good points in here that relates to what we're talking about. And this is what the white man knows. So that, and we emphasize this, not just the white man, this is how this capitalist system, this one thing the young lords also express, how capitalism use racism as a tool, you know, a tool of control and division. You know what I'm saying? So, but anyway, to go on what he was talking about, he said, so they very skillfully make you and me hate our African identity, our African characteristics. You know yourself that we have been a people who hated our African characteristics. We hated our heads. We hated the shape of our nose. We wanted one of those long dog-like noses, you know. We wanted the color of our we hated the color of our skin. We hated the blood of Africa that was in our veins, and then hating our feature and our skin and our blood. Why we have end up hating ourselves, and we've hated ourselves. I know a lot of people has listened or read that speech that Malcolm gave, and I thought that was like one of the most powerful speeches. Like Malcolm had such a big influence on me, where, like he said, once I started to get a positive view of Africa, when I started knowing the real history of Africa, once I started knowing the contributions that Africans have played in history and stuff, that's when my view of myself started to change. You know what I'm saying? And this is what we see, and we see reflected in this right here with the young lords. When they started to go back to their roots and origins of who they were as a people and love who they were. You know, love the fact that they were Taino and African. You know what I'm saying? Not try to live up and identify with the colonial value system. That's when the young lords started to change the way the Puerto Ricans looked at themselves here in the United States. They started to love who they was again. You know what I'm saying? So the decolonizing process is a socially institutionalizing process. You know what I'm saying? This is what we find here with the young lords. They institutionalize this into their organization, into their movement. This pamphlet that everyone was required to read, and I'm sure they had many discussions on it. It helped them to decolonize. It helped them to purge themselves from that reverse racism on themselves. You know what I'm saying? And I think this is also, and I read that passage by Malcolm X to show that a lot of this has to do with when we was enslaved in Africa and how the European powers tried to make Africa, to justify slavery, the stepchild of the world. So we had internalized this all across the world. You know what I'm saying? Because at the time, this transatlantic slave trade was everywhere. So when we as black people was put at the bottom, everybody started hating being who they was in relation to that. You know what I mean? And Puerto Ricans being of African ancestry started to hate themselves. Cubans hating themselves. You know what I'm saying? Not want to identify with their African roots. You know, wanted to more identify with their Spanish roots. You know what I'm saying? The mallegation that came from slavery. Go ahead, Gabby.
No, yeah, I really loved this chapter, and it really hits home because growing up, especially when I was in high school, I fucking saw this shit where where um where where some people told Afro Caribbean people, oh I'm telling them, oh, you're not African, you're Hispanic. You're not African, you're a Spaniard, you're Portuguese, you're French, and doing this identity politics, fucking bullshit. That right there, fucking saying, oh, you're not African enough, or you're not this enough. It's literally that right there. It's literally fucking pinning colonized people against one another, having them demonize one another, fight amongst themselves in order to uphold white supremacy in the interests of the bourgeois, giving them a reactionary, racist, white supremacist worldview of themselves, of their history, and of other colonized people in order to pin them against themselves. And a lot of Cuban diaspora here, especially in Miami, if you know, you know. But a lot of Cuban diaspora, especially in Miami, have assimilated to quote unquote American culture, where they don't even know what their own culture is, and oftentimes they reject the African and Taino roots of Cuban culture. They completely reject it, and they try to associate more and connect more with the Spanish aspects of it, and they just completely either whitewash, pervert, or sexualize the African and Taino roots of Cuban culture, and it's fucking sad and fucking disgusting to see when that shit happens. But yeah, this right here, what the young lords were doing, decolonizing people by engaging in cultural revolution, actually teaching them the history of racism and how it's economic, social, and rooted within the socioeconomic basis of capitalism in order to maximize profit, divide the masses, uphold the interests of the oppressor class. That right there is powerful because it's showing the people who they actually are, where racism actually comes from, and actually teaching them their history, teaching them that they weren't just quote unquote slaves, that they weren't just quote unquote savages, and they had entire histories, entire nations, entire societies, culture, infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So yeah.
Hey, think about this. Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, he said, the excellence, the pinnacle of warfare ain't destroying your enemy's army. It's making your enemy succumb without even fighting them. Yep. And this is what they applied to us, the imperialists and the colonial powers and stuff. They made us internalize our self-hate so much that it was easy for us to be defeated. You know what I'm saying? We defeat ourselves when we maintain these ways of thinking. You know what I'm saying? It's impossible for us to try to fight for self-determination and fight for liberation when we have hold ideals like this that is really antagonistic to our very social being. You know what I mean?
Literally. No, yeah, 100%. And
this, let me emphasize this. I know some of y'all have seen the post probably on Facebook when I was talking about post-traumatic colonial disorder is real. This is the type of stuff I'm talking about. Yep. Like when social being has been made to like look at itself in a mirror and hate what it sees. And a lot of times we don't even consciously even realize this, but we see it when we see it projected on other people. You know what I'm saying? When I see another Black person denigrate another Black person because they're darker hue, I know they're dealing with that cognitive dissonance in their brain. You know what I'm saying? Like that post-traumatic colonial disorder is reflected in so many different ways. Even the criminality that we see in our community, that like we feel like this is what it means to be a Black man in America. And I talk about this in my autobiography. Like I thought this was how we was supposed to be. Like once I started to develop that criminal way of thinking, like, shit, we supposed to be gangsters. We supposed to be out here taking in shit from, you know what I mean? It's about, and what Pac say? And this one thing I like about Pac, he was contradictory, but he talked about it in ways, you know what I'm saying? And sometimes it wasn't in the most positive ways, but it was like he was clinically diagnosing us. You know what I'm saying? Like when he talked about, you got to get yours, I got to get mine. Get yours, like that's a reflection of that colonialized mentality turned criminal. You know what I'm saying? And that's why we do like sell drugs and become pimps and all this other stuff, because we internalize this stuff, man. And we don't even respect our own community when we look at ourselves in this light. You know what I'm saying? I want to go ahead, Gabby, and then I want to bring Africa in, because me and him be talking about this stuff a lot too. And him being also of Nigerian origin, I think his story and the fact that he's very, very well clinically, sociologically capable of analyzing his past, I think he'll out for a lot to this discussion too. But go ahead, Gabby.
That right there, that right there of ripping away African people from their roots, from their culture, and giving them a whitewashed, racist, reactionary perspective of who they are, that they're just slaves, that Africa was just quote unquote filled with savages, and not giving them an actual history of why African communities are so impoverished, and that causes colonized people to have internalized racism, to look at their communities and to look at their materialistic conditions and say, well, shit, this is how it's always been. It's never been anything else, and this is how it's just always going to be. That fucking mentality that nothing was ever different, that it's always been the same, and that nothing is ever going to change or move forward. That's that internalized racism, whitewashed bourgeois thought that is intentionally festered by teaching them a false sense of history in order to embolden and in order to embolden and bolster reactionary self-hatred, to keep colonized people fighting amongst themselves to join the forces of reaction, and to keep them from becoming class consciousness in order to uphold white supremacy. And same thing with Puerto Ricans, because I said this before, I say it again. Puerto Rican culture has its roots in African and Taino culture. Same thing with Cuban culture, same thing with Jamaican culture, and so on and so forth. The roots of culture, of these cultures in the Caribbean, have their roots in African and indigenous cultures, as well as in Latin America as a whole. But because of this white supremacist reactionary history that is taught, because of this anti-blackness that is taught amongst histories, a lot of people from the Caribbean, like Puerto Ricans, Cubans, and so on and so forth, who have a lighter texture, oftentimes demonize their own African ancestry, the African roots within their own culture, and demonize other Caribbean people who have a darker complexion. These are that internalized racism, and keeping colonized people divided based on skin color and race. So that way they're unable to actually fight against their actual enemy, the capitalists. And
No doubt, comrade. Hey, yeah, you said a whole mouthful right there. I want to bring Africa, and because I want y'all to hear this. Like, this is one thing. When I got out of prison and I saw, like, it was a whole lot of Nigerians, a whole lot of people from the continent over here, and I saw how Black Americans born and raised here was treating my people, our people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, man, what the fuck? Like, this has got to be the most insane shit ever. Like, I could put a hood over some of these Black Americans at the jobs I was working. I was like, man, cause y'all act just like white supremacists to me. Like I was always cool. I even got a nickname from the Nigerians. They called me what's they Dio. They called me Dio. Brother.
Oh,
Yeah. And then like I always had, but I think the reason why is because I had decolonized myself. Like I would even talk to them about history over African. They're like, damn, how you know African history? I'm like, shit, I might not be like a lot of Americans you came across. You know what I mean? I decolonized. Like we could talk about Franz Fanon. We could talk about Kwame Nkrumah. We could talk about Millicard Cabral. You know what I mean? And that was kind of impressive to them because that's like, damn, you know, a lot of our own African history and people we look up to. You know what I'm saying? But I want Africa to talk about his experience, like within the Black community, him having roots in Nigeria. What's the Caribbean island?
no, it's Nigeria. My father's from Nigeria and my mother's from Liberia.
Oh, okay. So it's all from the continent. Okay, yeah.
So I grew up in Nigeria from when I was like 2 to 10. So I went to school there. That was like my first, when I was aware of anything, was like when I was over there. And then I came over here when I was about 10 years old. And it's like the culture was different. But getting a chance to like look back on it and to see it, like everything that we talk about in the book, like I could see it in my own life, in my own reality. Not like I always tell people, I'm a sociologist by trade, and that's how I view everything. That's how I view the world. And what the author is saying in the book is sociological. That's how imperialism socialized the people to be able to exploit them. It's all the way. It goes back to imperialism. No matter whatever we want to talk about, whether it's black men, black women, white man, white whatever, like immigration. It all goes back to imperialism. Because even like I can remember when I went to school in Africa, like I'm in Africa in the schools I went to, they taught English and they taught French. Like French was like it wasn't no African languages being taught in the school. Now I remember everything vividly. Everything was to try to be European. I mean, because they were colonized by England. So everything like motherfuckers drank tea. Like you in Africa and shit, it's hot as hell in the fucking morning. Like motherfuckers waking up really. I remember drinking tea in the fucking morning. And I mean, like, what the fuck I'm doing drinking hot ass tea in Africa in the morning? But I used to drink fucking tea in the morning, bro. Like everything was like towards like being English. I mean, and I'm listening to the book and it's saying that, yo, but like the main thing is the institutions. So like when we talking, when we in our political education class, when we learning, when we read it, when we reading our 10-point plan, we reading our history, yo, we can't go past the building of institution. Because that is very important, because that's how you undo all the brainwashing. I mean, like my mom was going so many places when I was listening to you speak, and I'm listening, like we reading, going through it, I'm listening. My mom was just like, I'm thinking about the Cornel West, the electoral politics thing that they got, the thing he got going on with the progressive, with the right wing, like all of that. And where I'm listening to them, like I listen to Cornel West say what they've been doing to black people. I said there's no class dynamic within it. I mean, so like even though it's racial, there's also a class dynamic within all of it. I mean, so the Africans that you met while you was in prison, you know, for them to even make it to the United States of America, for you to meet them in jail, they had to be of a certain class. And like you say, like you know all this history, and like they hear you, like, yo, they probably don't even know the history. Because they don't learn that history that you talking about, that revolutionary history. They learn the Queen's history. They learn about England and all of that goofy stuff. I mean, they start thinking like they're European. So like to them, they think they're better than the other black people. Like, I mean, like the black people, like when I came over here, they used to call me African booty scratcher. Like they used to just think like in Africa, like you just over there scratching your booty. I never understood like what that meant, African booty scratcher. Like you in Africa, like you just scratching your booty the whole time. Like it used to be bugging me in my head. Like I could never understood. But like that's what they used to say stuff like that. And like you internalize that. I mean, like it makes you start to question yourself, who you are. But that's what imperialism does. That's what it has all these institutions in place to do. That's why they got the economic system, that's an institution. They got the education, that's an institution. They got the legal field, that's an institution. Economic, that's an institution. They have all these different institutions, and they're all controlled through white supremacy. And like, you'll be lost if you don't know. Like, you just wake up, like you wake up in this, like you just, like you believe in everything that you get from school, from the white supremacist school. You're going over there thinking like, yo, Christopher Columbus discovered America. Yo, this is how things supposed to be. That's that and third. Yo, these people are in the condition they're in because they don't pray, because they don't dress right, because they don't talk right, because they don't wear their pants right. You listen to all of that come from the media figures, that come from the politicians, and you just walking around here like a zombie, colonialized. What you said in that speech, I mean, like your mind is all colonial, and we talked about it today. Your mind is all warped. And then when you leave from that space, you go into another space, you with somebody else that their mind is warped. They've been going to their school, they've been told that you're the enemy, this, that, and that. Now both of y'all arguing with each other and not really getting to the point of what's going on. These imperialist savages that's doing all of this, separating all of us. And that's why these classes are so important, man. Real talk. Like, I wish, like, we got to get more people to join these classes, because this is where it starts at. It starts with education, learning who you are.
Absolutely. Hey, you made a point. I want to say this. Some of the Africans I met when I got out of prison, I realized there was more of them that were educated though. Like one I came across, there's one that comes to mind off the top. He's at my last job. Like, he knew about all African revolutionary history. And me and him used to chop it up. He was like, Kwame, Kwame. You know what I mean? He's like, I see you, Kwame. And then I used to share with him what I really be out here on, and told him my experience, how I started becoming politicized in prison. But you're right. A lot of the other, like, majority of the Africans I came across, like, I was talking about their history. They knew like certain, like you'll go to school and you'll learn a fact. You know what I'm saying? But you don't know nothing around that, no historical context of that. Like, I talked to this one brother from Ghana, and we started talking about Kwame Nkrumah. He was like, only thing he knew, he was the first president. That's it. Like, he had no understanding of his ideals. He didn't understand like what he was pushing for, why Ghana is in the condition it is today, why Africa is in a condition. Like, I saw that a lot of Africans that was coming over here, they were of a higher class and they were trying to get by like everybody else. Social mobility, that was their goal. It wasn't about, liberation. It wasn't about joining with Black liberation, the African diaspora and stuff like Kwame Nkrumah was doing when he came over here. You know what I mean? Identifying and relating to us and shit. You know what I'm saying? So you definitely right about that. But I just thought that was like ironic though, when I got out of prison and I saw how like Blacks over in America just hated African culture. Like they was like, I don't want to be around them. They stink and stuff. I'm like, man, I haven't came across one motherfucker in this job that stink, man. Like, if anything, I came across a number of you motherfuckers over here.
No, I almost forgot. Now, while you was talking earlier, I started thinking about something I read, something or saw from John Henry Clark. And he was saying, John Henry Clark was saying, like, he was a professor, he was a writer, but he was saying, like, you got to dehumanize the people. You got to make it palatable for people to despise the people and see them as slaves. He said there was a whole institution, education, everything, edifice was set around making Africa look like savages. Like, you look inside the New York Times, the papers they used to write early in the 1800s, and the early 1900s, like the way they depicted Africa as savages. Like, that's what they gave to the people here. So like, if you're a Black person and you're here, if you're a white person and you're here, and you're seeing like these people as savages, like they don't know, like nobody want to associate themselves with savages, with people that's walking around scratching their butt. So like they're socialized in their minds to think of Africans as like not having no civilization, not knowing nothing, just brutes, just animals. So, and you don't want to be associated with that. You're not taught like, this is where you came from, this is how you got to where you are, this is who you are. Like you was talking about Malcolm. Like this one speech about Malcolm was like, who named you Bunch? Where did you come from? How did you become the person you are? What was your religion? Like he was saying, like after you learn all these things, you go back and learn history and learn who you are. Then you know who your enemy is. But until you learn all that stuff, you walk around practicing identity politics. You be hating yourself, not even knowing what. Like, yo, this is deep, man. The enemy we fighting is powerful, and they've been here for a minute. And if we don't take these classes, if we don't have these classes, we're never going to understand that. Because the same way, like we said, the same way they're doing it in Africa, they're doing it here. So it's like two people, both sides of the continent, both don't know each other, don't love each other, don't have that camaraderie. Like there's no chance of doing anything. There's no chance of revolution. Because how you gonna have a revolution when you don't even know what you're revolting for? I mean, so you're just fighting for petty stuff. I mean, but yeah, man, like I'm telling you, man, it's deep. It's heavy. This book was heavy too. I've been explaining it.
No doubt, no doubt. Shanti?
Yeah, I would like to say something about this because this is really, really important, especially for African people within these borders. Once again, I've been saying this time and time again. We have been so stripped of our true identity, of our true ancestral roots, where we come from, that, our indigenous ancestors from Alkebulan were kidnapped and we became Black. We were no longer our destiny. We were no longer where we came from. We were now just the bottom of the racial class hierarchy, savages, uncivilized, no history whatsoever. We were just this outer space people from nowhere. And the systems that have enforced that belief physically and institutionally and ideologically speaking has affected us to where many of us still don't know who the hell we are. Hell, even in the 20th century, there was rampant sexual violence among us. There was rampant colorism among us, texturism, hairism, just such searing hatred against each other, especially the children of every generation of the last century, because they were the ones that faced much of the brunt of it. So the fact that we see ourselves as completely separate people from our ancestral kin back home in our continent, you have you have the Africans versus the so-called Blacks, the Blacks here, which is not even true because we're so African no matter what, but because of those systems, we have been so stripped from our African identity. We're now just this biological color that, that came out of nowhere that, we somehow called ourselves by, which we didn't. So much of our history distorted, completely gone, completely distorted, completely removed from us, completely stripped from us. And especially in regards to the young lords, the fact that it was Afro-Taino Boricua youth that did the work of decolonizing and making those people aware of their destiny, aware of their history, aware of their actual identity, that was very, very powerful because Puerto Ricans with Mestizaje have, been so divided with the pigmentocracy on the island. And even to this day, having them denounce their African heritage, denounce their Taino heritage, denounce any other indigenous heritage that they may have, because it's a mix of many, many different groups on the island. But especially being nasty towards their African roots that, in order to, better the so-called Puerto Rican race, they have to, get with someone that is lighter skinned, that is on the bourgeois food chain, you know what I'm saying, at the top of the bourgeois food chain, what they want, and even still is never enough. But that's the point. It's psychological warfare that is so deeply ingrained with people of indigenous African descent, especially here on this continent, that, We still have an identity crisis. We still don't know who the hell we are. It's a matter of class. It's a matter of dividing people based on what we look like and giving us these biological identities, but not our true ancestral ones. You know, our Ibo ancestors, our Yoruba ancestors, our Baka ancestors, our Bakongo ancestors. Much of our culture, much of our heritage here is the result of our resistance of keeping those traditions alive. We're not any different from our ancestral kin back home in our continent. We are the same people. We may be in different places, but it doesn't make us any less African. But a lot of us within these borders still don't know that. We still don't know that because of that plight of such hatred, such negativity within ourselves. Hell, we wake up and we look into the mirror and we don't know who we are. We don't know who we are. We just see this psychologically white face. We just see this light face in almost every single one of us, no matter what. And the fact that we are not taught our real history, even with all the plights that we've done to get, ethnic studies in the college institutions, it's still never enough because they still lie to us about our history, no matter what. These are Western institutions, so, I'm not even, surprised. But even still, that identity crisis that has been looming over us for the past 400 years, for the past 404 years to be exact. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it takes a lot of willpower to even decolonize and reclaim who we truly are, where we come from, because our ancestral kin back home are starting to fight back against the same oppressors that we have. You know what I'm saying? We have the same oppressors. We're under the same oppressive system of the capitalist, imperialist, bourgeois ruling class. And it's very, very important for us as African people to reclaim our identity as Africans, to reclaim our African blood, to reclaim our African roots, to reclaim our heritage, to reclaim our history once and for all, because that's essentially one part of how the bourgeois class will fall apart, by us reclaiming our rightful identity, because they rely on us, on these biological markers in order to keep itself going. And when we start decolonizing, and when we start reclaiming our identity, when we start reclaiming our roots as African people, then we can be able to make headway. Even though it still looks very, very bad, we can make a lot of headway. And that's why these classes are important, once again, because it's that one step starting in our process of decolonizing who we are and reclaiming who we are, to be able to achieve liberation and to be able to truly love ourselves and each other unapologetically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna throw in something, and I'm gonna get to you, Gabby.
Hey, hold up. Hey, hold up. I want to ask her, who are we? Who are we? What are we reclaiming?
Are you asking me?
Yeah. I'm asking you. What are we reclaiming? Who are we that we want to get to? And remember, it's like just imagine you at the crib right now. We just sitting back, listening to some music, and we talking. And I just listen to you. Now I'm rocking with you, but I'm saying, I'm trying to visualize it. What are we reclaiming? What are we trying to go back to?
We are reclaiming our identity as African people, and we are trying to reclaim our history that we do have civilizations, that we were a people just like everyone else, with our own science, with math, with a lot of advancements, with infrastructure, and our indigenous ways of life that is nurturing to not only ourselves, but the land that we've graced before we were colonized. And it's, way more than that. But essentially, the basic steps towards understanding who we truly are, essentially.
Hey, all power, comrade, all power.
So I want to put this out there real quick. They was talking about in this chapter, like if you have one black blood, a drop of blood, black blood in you, you was black. If I'm not mistaken, that came from Plessy versus Ferguson. That was a 18, I want to say 96 case that dealt with race. I forget all the details about Plessy and stuff, but I know it was something about getting on a train and sitting in a section on the train that was only reserved for black people and all this other stuff versus white sections and stuff like that. But that's where this concept of the white one drop of blood that you're deemed black. But I like the fact that they turned it on his head and talked about how like a lot of Puerto Ricans, they were saying, look, I got Spanish blood in me. You know, it's like it was a reverse form of it. You know what I'm saying? But it was still about colonialism. You know what I'm saying? Because you want to deny the African, the Puerto Rican, the Taino aspect of who you are, and you wanted to more identify with your white side of who you are. And it brings me, and I talked about this before, and I talked about even my autobiography. I remember one of, you know, I ain't gonna say her name, but one of my aunties, she was a history professor, substitute teacher, and we started talking about Africa, and my cousin that went around and traced the transatlantic slave trade. Like she went over to Ghana. And I brought up, I was like, man, I'm so glad she went over there and visited Ghana and saw the slave dungeons that they held our people in and stuff. And this individual in my family, she was like, what? African? I don't want to hear nothing about Africa. I'd rather hear something about our Irish roots. You know what I mean? And that's that same type of way of thinking. You thinking to yourself, like, what? Like, how did that even come in this conversation? But again, it comes back to how we internalize the continent and the negativity that they projected on that continent. You know what I'm saying? And I saw that a lot growing up with the colorism, like the more lighter you are, the better you are, allegedly. Or especially with a woman, the lighter. I remember it used to be a phase where people felt like if you got a light skinned black woman that you was better than having a black darker skinned black woman. You know what I'm saying? Like these are all these internal ways of thinking that that reflect these colonial ways of thinking and stuff. But yeah, look into that Plessy versus Ferguson, y'all. That was a case 1896. That's also how the Jim Crow laws started. You know what I'm saying? Behind that Plessy versus Ferguson case. Go ahead, Gabby. Or do you still just got your hand up
Oh
from
yeah.
the first?
No. I did raise my hand. I just didn't realize that I was muted. But no, yeah, that right there, with what y'all were talking about with colorism and people having this mentality. If you have a lighter skin complexion, they're better off. That is that to this day, and a lot of people talk about it, but that to this day is still a problem here. That's still a problem in Cuba. Cuba has a really bad colorism issue where people use terms like blanquita or blanco, which means white in English, as positive connotations, while using words like negro to mean negative connotations, and associating it with negativity, and that colorist white supremacist fucking racist idea that the lighter you are, the quote unquote better you are, the better off you are, or they must be happier, or they must be smarter, or whatever shit. That fucking racist shit is ways to divide people, of having colonized people divide amongst themselves by fucking pigmentocracy, and and feeling inferior or superior based on one another. And until we educate, until we meet the masses where they are and give them an actual history and an actual correct ideological and political line of how things are the way they are, why they got the way they are, and um, and and teaching them how to apply scientific, principled, and dialectical analysis of our communities, we're never going to achieve liberation and self-determination. And I want to say a quote from Huey P. Newton, if that's okay. Let me just pull it up. Sorry about that. But yeah, this I think it's here. Here it is. Sorry about that. Oh, here it is. To quote Huey P. Newton himself, likewise, military victory does not necessarily lead to political victory. In people's war, the people are the instruments of victory, which is the transfer of power to the people. Essential to this winning the people to embrace a correct ideological and political line. If the masses attain effective political power but lack a correct ideological and political line, defeat will follow. If the masses are won to a correct ideological and political line, and this is organizationally consolidated, but they cannot yet seize political power, eventual victory is secured and awaits the ripening of a revolutionary situation. In other words, ideological and political line determines everything. If the masses are not won over to a correct scientific analysis of analyzing both the primary and the secondary contradictions of capitalism, of how everything is interconnected and how everything goes back to class, then we will never achieve economic, social, and cultural liberation. We will never achieve an uprooting and replacing a capitalist society with a new society, with a new mode of production, new social relations, new culture, new political power, and constantly combating against the forces of reaction. If the masses are not taught of their actual history and how things got to where they are, if they're not psychologically and materially decolonized through cultural revolution, mass line, and providing for them for their materialistic needs and conditions, then we will never have liberation. And that right there was what Shanti was saying. That's so essential of teaching the masses, both colonized and colonizer people, that Africa wasn't just a place, quote unquote, filled with savages. That they had their own society, their own culture, their own infrastructure, their own achievements, their own technological advancements, their own socioeconomic systems, their own socioeconomic systems, and so on and so forth. And teaching that is so essential. And yeah, that's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that you brought it back to the what Huey talked about, correct ideological line and analysis, because this is the thing. This is the balance we have to strike when we do get back to studying our history, our culture, our contributions from every civilization. We can't lose our class analysis. You know what I'm saying? Because it can turn us into the opposite. We can become cultural nationalists. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Cultural revolution. I'm sorry.
and that's a big problem because like there's no, and I said this in the last time, the last discussion we had, there's no golden era. Like nobody trying to go back to no golden era, because even in Africa, like we still had class distinctions. You know what I'm saying? And so if we become like cultural nationalists, and we become prideful of being black, become prideful of being African, but we lack class analysis, then we end up becoming just like the oppressor, because now we just see that liberation of black people is going to free us somehow, and even in that analysis of that, it's not any real distinctions of who in the black population is of what class. You know what I'm saying? And what class interest they serve. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of black people in power. But what type of power are they promoting? Like we could talk about the situation with Africa with Ras Baraka. Like that's a whole black regime, neo-colonialist regime out there. You know what I'm saying? We can go to Africa, the continent, and look at all these people that's in power in Africa. They're neo-colonialists, though. The same people that was in power before is in power through them as puppets of them. You know what I'm saying? They control the economics. They control the political dynamics. They control even the development of how that country is developed. We look at Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has a whole lot of Puerto Ricans in power over there. But what interests do they serve? Their policies that's been implemented over the years, it's been policies that made them less self-sufficient. Like at one point, I was watching a documentary where Puerto Rico was like 75% of their GDP was agriculture. Now what is it? It's 0.8%. It ain't even a point, comrade. It's not even a point. And most of the people that was in power look just like those people in that country. You know what I'm saying? So they didn't serve the Puerto Rican interests. You know what I'm saying? So this is why we always have to have a class analysis. Just getting in power, just knowing our history ain't enough. We got to take it a step further and say, what type of class power need that are we advocating? What class struggles are we talking about and emphasizing within? Like when I talk about Africa, I'm not talking about the ones, the neo-colonialist empire. I want to talk about revolutionaries like Johanna Fernandez that related to the people. I want to talk about Millicard Cabral, that class struggle history. I want to talk about Kwame Nkrumah. You know what I'm saying? And when he recognized like he made mistakes, you know what I'm saying? Like you got to crush that colonial state in order for the power to really be in the hands of the people. You know what I'm saying? That's what we have to keep in mind when we go back to our roots, so we don't lose our class analysis. Go ahead, Captain Africa.
The problem is like, who are those people now? So like that's what is so hard. Like, who are those people now that you can build bridges with that really are talking what we talking, like our philosophy? Because everybody say they're revolutionaries. Like the mayor we talking about, Ras Baraka. Like they running around calling him a revolutionary. He has people that call themselves Panthers that work with him, that work for him. So it's like it's so many different levels. But I really need this to grow. I need what we're doing to grow, because I want to find out who those people on the continent that's doing the same work. Like that's what we talk about in mass line, intercommunalism. Like I'm telling you, I really want to know. I want to know who them people are, so we could build them bridges. But most of the time when you hear people talking about going to Africa, it's usually the black managerial class. Like they're going over there to be this new slave master. Like these people are not going over there to work with the people. They're going to take the land and they're going to practice the capitalism that they learn here over there. Like that's what they did in Liberia. That's like, I mean, it's the same thing. Like that's what they're going over there to do. And that's what those Africans are expecting them to do. The managerial Negroes over there. Like they're the one that's working together. Like all this relationship that's built is built with this managerial class. The revolutionaries, like we really need to find them people over there. Because I'm sure they're there. I mean, wherever the people are at, what is it? That's what the Panthers are there. I mean, but wherever they're at, man, I know they're catching hell and they're fighting. Like, I wish I knew how to make those kind of connections. You mute.
You're mute, comrade. You're muted.
I want to get a few of the other comrades in. I see Yessie just jump on. How you doing, comrade?
Hello, y'all. Just got off work on my way home.
All right. Well, this definitely.
Everyone's good.
Yeah, it was good. Definitely check it out on YouTube when we upload it. If you want to read to catch up on it. But this is probably one of my favorite. I kind of say that every time I jump on her because it's certain things like she honed in on that I think is like definitely relevant to our struggle today. You know what I'm saying? To really build this revolutionary intercommunal relationships with each other and have this common understanding of what we need to do to decolonize ourselves. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna bring in Zen, Alyssa, or Johnny Torres. I want to bring y'all into this. Johnny Torres, see your hand up.
Yeah, what's going on, everybody?
Prior to the people.
Yeah, power to the people. First of all, interesting chapter, and there was another thing I wanted to say about. There's been to a point where I guess when I was younger in my early 20s, where I did hate myself, and it did bother me to I really couldn't function right. But then I noticed that it's better being different because I didn't want to be like everybody else. Everyone, when I looked at it, weren't even finding themselves either. It seemed like they were just following. They weren't really themselves as well. So I'm just like, I didn't feel like at that age, I didn't feel like there was a lot of examples that I was looking after, like people around me. So it was best that I went my own way and try to find who I was, which I did eventually. I guess when I started, being a part of the revolution, I feel like that was my true calling and that's who I was. And, I didn't want to be like everyone else. It was better that way. And, as soon as you start loving yourself and who you are, you get that notion of the hate out of there. It doesn't even exist, And another thing, I find it interesting because it's the struggle we all face of the hatred, not being seen like as myself as I guess a hardcore Mexican because my Spanish isn't all that great. People would kind of like dog me sometimes because I wouldn't speak Spanish that good, which I'm still learning. I'm getting by, but compared to a lot of the people like Yesenia, her Spanish is very good. But I'm getting there. I definitely, then it's like when I do go to Mexico or something like that, I'm too American. And I feel like we all explore finding create our culture. And it's an inner battle that, we all face, and I feel like we're slowly recognizing who we are. And it's good. And I found out who I was and what's the role that I'm playing in this revolutionary movement. And I think I'm doing a good job. So as other people that are around me. So that's what I wanted to say.
No doubt, comrade. You definitely is. I love your poetry. I think your poetry, like I said, is powerful. It's poignant. You know what I mean? Yessie's poetry. I love her. I hope she start putting her stuff in book form and stuff where we can pass around in the movement. One thing I was thinking, and one day I want to institutionalize this within the Second Rainbow Coalition. And I'm glad hearing you say that. I didn't know if that you still was working on your Spanish. I was learning Spanish in prison, teaching myself in there. You know what I mean? But I think we should have Spanish speaking classes. You know what I'm saying? In the Second Rainbow Coalition, that anybody that wants to jump on there and learn Spanish can learn Spanish. We got enough people that speak Spanish that can help us all learn Spanish fluently. And I think that'd take our movement to a whole nother level if we a bilingual movement. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And oh yeah, one last thing. Oh yeah, Yesenia is going to be in the anthology book that we're all in. The one that you're in, High Thurman. So she put some poetry in there too. So it's going to be great.
No doubt, no doubt. That's what's up. But yeah, I think that'd be big. And I always thought about this, like if we think of this, if all the comrades in our movement, especially like let's say like white comrades and black comrades, we go to brown beret events and we speak all in Spanish. You know what I'm saying? Like that forms a form of revolutionary intercommunalist solidarity like no other, because no movement is promoting, bilingual uh 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 abilities, capabilities of their comrades. You know what I'm saying? And I think that'd be powerful. Just like brown berets coming or Puerto Ricans coming to event like white Panthers is doing and being able to speak fluent English, like that shows a connection with us. Like we can easily relate. And I think that break down a lot of the barriers that colonialism had put on us. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to throw that out there because more and more I hear people talk about they want to work on their Spanish. So I'm gonna be like advocating for that, where we can like maybe twice a week people can jump on these Zooms and we can have Spanish classes where we can work on our fluency and stuff. You know what I mean? I want to bring a few other people in. Yeah, sign language too. My wife can teach y'all sign language. She know that good.
Oh, for real?
Alyssa, yeah.
Right
She
on.
Oh,
yeah, she
I'm
bet.
starting.
I saw something on TV and I try to mimic the hand signals just to see how if she was on top of her shit. She was
Uh,
like, "Oh, yeah, that means help me." I was like, "Okay,
Woo!
I
Yeah,
see."
we need that
You know
too.
what I mean? I
That's
just learned
awesome
it
as
on
fuck.
watching TV and shit. It was in a movie or some shit. You know what I mean?
Oh,
But
Yeah,
yes.
no, that's really important. It really is.
yeah. Alyssa, what you get out of this chapter? And I want
Oh
Zen,
man.
Gabby got something else to say. I'm just trying to bring a few other people in. But
I wish that Subi, I saw that Subi was on his own TikTok before this came on, but it's actually funny. Like everything is always, I don't know. I believe in like synchronicity. Sometimes it's weird, but um that's exactly the topic of conversation that we've been having. There's been issues in the, I don't know, in certain spaces, like people that have, I guess, left our organization, um, that don't agree with all of the different people that are in the Young Lords. They're more, I guess, nationalists, right? But Subi is and always has been like he when he before he even signed on to the Rainbow Coalition, it was that anybody that wanted to work with him, he was going to work with, and that's how he's always been, and he's never changed ever since I've known him. But there's been some like um talk behind the scenes. So he just had a interview with David Rivera on TikTok the other day, and it was literally about this topic. They had Italian. The lady's name was Angie. They had, Denise Oliver. There was never. I mean, you had to be a revolutionary. You had to have the right like ideology. Sorry, but that was never a thing. So people tend to kind of like have been signing on to things that they don't really know what they're talking about, I guess. And that's why like everybody keeps on saying that these classes are so important. I don't know, the last like ever since I became part of the representatives for the Second Rainbow Coalition, it's really like opened my eyes to um I don't know, just colonized. I was born here. I'm a white girl. Like I'm learning everything. I'm 34 years old. This is all fucking new to me, man. You know what I mean? Like, but it getting involved with everybody here has also changed my perspective on just looking at like how big the transatlantic slave trade actually was, and what slavery actually was, and how everybody's been in that circle for so long. America's however many years old, not very many, and there was lots of slavery going on for a lot longer before that. And that actually Subi has kind of drilled that one to Mexico a lot. Conversation with Subi, you'll probably end up on that topic. And I wish that he was, I don't know, right here, but yeah, that's really it. I think I need to start writing notes down, but then I like while you guys are talking, I end up like doing other things because I have ADD, but I should really write notes down because I can't keep track of my thoughts. But I had a lot of them while you guys are all talking, but that's all.
Well, raise your hand if any of them come back up to you. Hey, speaking about an interview with Subi, if y'all I don't know what platform it's gonna be on. I'm guessing TikTok.
Yeah, Subi is always on TikTok. If you follow Afro Taino 88, then he is on there every single day at some point or another. But that interview with David and the interview that he's supposed to be doing one with you, right?
Yeah, tomorrow at 5:00.
Yeah, so the one with you and then the one with David, like things like that he puts on YouTube as well, which is just under New Era Young Lords.
Okay. All right. As soon as I find out what all the mediums it's gonna be on, I share it with everybody so y'all could be, if y'all wanted to tune in to that interview tomorrow or follow up on this interview he gave with David Rivera. You know what I mean? I think that definitely be informative. I'm gonna get Zen in, and then I'm going to Gabby, and then Shanti, and then we'll probably close this out. What was some of the stuff that like how did you relate to a lot of stuff that was in this subsection, Zen?
Well, similar line of thought of Alyssa, being able to see like the things that we need to deconstruct and unfuck our minds of when it comes to decolonizing our minds and the way that we see things, the way that we see people, calling out this bullshit of blood quantum, which is nothing but a colonizer idea, as well as, the idea of unity really needing to happen amongst revolutionaries in order to actually fight against the system. Because when it comes down to it, that's our fucking enemy, not each other. And I think it's important for a lot of people to learn that every one of these revolutionary groups was at its core, being mixed with everybody who is around, who is a revolutionary mind frame. Even in the original White Panthers, there was Black members. Why? Because that's the party that was nearby for them to organize with. It's so fucking important for people to understand, like, look, these things that we have been miseducated on when it comes to race and blood quantum and all that shit, that is colonizer thought that we need to unfuck our minds of and let go of, because all that serves is to divide us. It's really important to highlight these things that, in the Young Lords and in the Panthers, that people were seeking unity and going, you know what, no, we need to all come together and actually work together. We need to deconstruct the things that we have been conditioned to and realize that that is not reality. That is simply a frame of mind, a thing constituted of nothing but racist ideology that was never real in the fucking first place. Humans have been on this earth, in our current form anyway, between 200 and 300,000 years. And it's only been about the last 500 that this concept of race according to color has even fucking existed. It came into being at the same time as capitalism, and it served a purpose of, falsely justifying subjugating people into slavery or other forms of labor exploitation. It serves nothing but the fucking bourgeoisie and their ability to exploit us.
Right. And then, you know what? The irony of this, who's told me where I found out that all that slavery stuff was bullshit, of the justification, was the godfather of capitalism himself, Adam Smith. in his book, The Wealth of Nation, he said, look, all that shit of going over there saving souls, that was bullshit. They went over there because of economics. That was slavery to make economics. It was just to justify, you didn't understand what they was doing. You didn't understand. Adam Smith was actually an atheist. I didn't know that till I started studying more about him and stuff. You know what I mean? And that made a big impression on me. I was like, damn, this the godfather of capitalism, and he just exposed them motherfuckers. You know what I mean? Right. And you definitely right. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, like for instance, I can't wait till we do hopefully next year we can vote on reading a book on evolution, because evolution like changed my way of thinking about a lot of stuff, especially us as a species. I started to realize like all of us right here on here right now, there's only 1% difference between all of us. And I actually might have more genetically more closer to Zen than I might have Africa. With Comrade Africa. Ain't that crazy? Like that don't like the average, because we so programmed to think like race is a real biological thing. You know what I'm saying? But the mutations that make us who we are with our hair texture and all that stuff, that is a very, very small, minute aspect of our DNA. And that's the thing that I started learning about evolution, is that a person that can be black might have more genetically relation to somebody that don't look like them at all. You know what I'm saying? They could have more genetic relation to a person that's Chinese, but they black. You know what I'm saying? Or they're white. You know what I'm saying? Like the shit don't even make sense at all. You know what I'm saying? So like we have to have these forms of political education so we can deconstruct some of these ways of thinking so we can start to deal with reality. You know what I'm saying? Once we deal with reality, we can start dealing and addressing with the real problem as a species. I always say this. When we do finally get to a communist society, like we're gonna look back at this time in history and we're gonna be like, what the fuck? Like people like divided themselves on race. Like how stupid were they? You know what I'm saying? Like that don't even make sense. Just like how we look back in times and we think about like the Salem witch hunts and be like, what? They was killing women because they thought they were witches? You know what I'm saying? And they was doing shit like if you floated in the water, you know what I'm saying, then that shows you're guilty. But if you drowned, oh, okay, maybe we was wrong. You know what I mean? Like what type of nonsense is that shit? You know what I'm saying? But that's how we gonna look at this shit 500 years or whatever years from now when we finally get to a society where we relate to each other as human beings, as a species. Like we can go extinct, people. That's the crazy thing about this shit. We letting motherfucker 1% population of our species decide if we gonna live or die on this planet. Like we see what global warming is doing. Like every motherfucker this summer felt the change of the climate. You feel me? And it's destroying us. Like we have so many bigger issues that we have to solve so we can survive as a species. Speaking about one other thing, just since I brought up evolution, like we're the only human species that's still here, y'all. Like all the other human species, they gone, man. Like they gone, and it's not no special thing about our species while we here and they not here. Like it's all kind of different reasons why they not here. And just because we think we're so smart, like we have evidence that some of those species was just as smart as us. Mm-hmm. Like they extinct though, man. And if we go extinct, like that's a real big shame on us as a species. But at this time, we understand it's a class struggle though. In order for us to gain control of the destiny of our species, like we have to, as a class, come together and defeat these motherfuckers that's controlling and disrupting what we can possibly be. You know what I'm saying? So
exactly. And to go back to what she was talking about with evolution, when it comes down to it, the the amount of genetic variety that we see amongst the population today, most of those genetic differences are actually a very tiny fragment of 1%. Like that 1% you quoted is actually the extreme majority, the largest difference you might find between anybody in the human population today. Most of our genetic differences come down to like 0.1% or even less. When it comes down to it, like, we are all the result of just genetic recombination of the same gene pool going back a couple 100,000 years. Where? To the cradle of life in Africa. So it's like we all come from one very small gene pool that just happened to have enough capacity for acclimation to various environments, of having all of these traits that could possibly be expressed in our phenotypes for us to be able to adjust to environments of where we live in order to survive. And this is an amalgamation of other human subspecies. Like, you will find that there are certain parts of the human population today that do still have a significant amount of Neanderthal DNA, for example. It's because we all are the result of the blending of, I think it was 3 or 4 different human subspecies that eventually, because of everybody breeding together, became one subspecies. So for people to try to be like, oh, well, we're a different species because of our skin. No, the fuck you're not. No, the fuck you're not. There's one race, and it is the human race. You know, these minor genetic mutations that allowed for acclimation to environment were not an evolutionary step. It did not create any new species. It simply created genetic variety for survival. Period. That's fucking it.
Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, and I can't wait. Again, I can't wait till we get to this subject. If y'all haven't studied evolution, but any of y'all haven't studied that, whenever we get around to that subject, it's gonna blow your motherfucking mind. Cause I was one of them people that thought that shit was bullshit until I started to study for myself, and that was like one of the biggest aha moments in my life. I was like, "What the fuck? This shit is real." And then. But it was just like studying Marx. You know what I'm saying? Marx, Lenin, and Mao. It's like, now I understand the evolution of human civilization. It's like opening up, peeling back a layer of that onion of reality, of understanding, my existence. You know what I mean? From a sociological standpoint, from a political, social, economic standpoint, but studying evolution, studying from a biological standpoint. All of these things is interrelated in such a way where this is a part of the political education. This helps us wake up and see things for what they really is and deal with reality. You know what I'm saying? These are the things they don't want us having these conversations, people. You know what I'm saying? Because we teaching our class the truth. And
Right.
we're dealing with the truth. It might be painful. You know what I mean? It definitely was painful for me when like certain things I started to become aware of. I was bitter, angry, and all kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? And evolution was one of them. I was like bitter. I was like, what the fuck? You know what I'm saying? Y'all told me this like y'all made me hate myself biologically too, not just racially, but biologically. Like I hated who I was as a species because I didn't recognize my origin. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing when we talk about the racial thing, going back to the origin of Africa. Once you hate Africa, you start hating yourself. Once you hate evolution, you will hate a part of yourself too, people. So, but we'll get to that discussion later. I don't know how many people have studied that subject, but that's gonna bust your shit. I just warn you right now. I'm gonna go around to Gabby and Shanti, and unless anybody after that has anything, that'd be the conclusion of this one. And this definitely was a good discussion. Go ahead, Gabby.
Oh no, yeah, this discussion was fucking amazing, and I absolutely love it. And I first wanted to go to what Johnny Torres was saying about Spanish and comrade. I feel the exact same because I'm Cuban. My parents didn't really sit me down to teach me Spanish, and I mostly heard like I know Spanish, I understand it, but I sound like I sound like a gringa. I sound my accent is is very bad. I can speak Spanish well, I can understand it well. It's just that my accent doesn't really sound all that good. And whenever I speak Spanish to other Cubans here, they always tell me to talk back to English, and that always kind of makes me that always kind of makes me feel a bit sad. You know, that always kind of makes me feel um um a bit like awkward, and it always made me feel a bit upset. So having Spanish classes would definitely be essential, because the second most spoken language in the United States is Spanish. Literally, that's the second most spoken language in the United States in Spanish. So if we want to engage in class solidarity with other liberation organizations and with other communities, we have to meet them where they're at psychologically, materially, and the way we connect best with people is by having the same lingo as them. You know, it's by speaking with them with their language and their dialect that they're comfortable with, that they know. That's one of the ways that we engage in building solidarity with people. So having Spanish classes here would be especially awesome, and it would especially be helpful, for people like you and me, Johnny, who want to learn, and solidify our Spanish. And as to what Sister Zen and you, Kwame, were saying about about evolution, it's so fucking true. Race has no actual fucking ground on any scientific basis. It's fucking made up. It's a fucking scam, a hoax. It's only designed to exploit, oppress, subjugate, and siphon the resources and surplus value of other people that are deemed as quote unquote not of the same race as others. That's literally it. And um and and, and what our history classes don't teach us is that before Europe started colonizing Africa, they were colonizing themselves. They were colonizing other European ethnic groups that were not considered white, quote unquote, among the racial hierarchy. The Irish, the Welsh, the Scottish, the Basque, the Corsican, the travelers. Under Tsarist Russia, Jewish people, Polish people, Ukrainians, Georgians, the indigenous people of Siberia, and the Asian ethnicities of Russia were not considered white under Tsarist Russia. Lenin wasn't considered white under Tsarist Russia because Lenin was half Jewish, and Stalin wasn't considered white under Tsarist Russia because Stalin was Georgian, and Georgians were considered white under the Tsarist racial hierarchy. So the roots of racism are rooted in class. First came the idea of profit, then came the idea of racism and dividing people among skin color. And with what y'all were saying about biology, and evolution, I want to say this quote from Darwin himself. It's my favorite quote from Darwin. In fact, I think I shared it with you, Comrade Kwame.
Okay.
And it says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is the most adaptable to change, that lives within the means available, and works cooperatively against common threats." That's what we have to do as a species right fucking now. We have to live within our materialistic means, and we have to work cooperatively, engage in intercommunalism, engage in helping other oppressed groups for seeking liberation, and to fight back against the capitalist imperialist ruling class, to combat all the contradictions of capitalism, all of them. But both the socioeconomic contradiction between the proletariat and the bourgeois, and the secondary contradictions of racism, of sexism, and so on and so on and so forth. And only then will we be able to have a new society, a new culture, a new socioeconomic system, new social relations, and so on and so forth. So right on.
Hey, send me that quote again. I might make a meme to that. I like that.
Oh hell yeah! I'll say it to you. It's my favorite quote from Kwame. Kwame. I don't know if you remember, but remember how we were talking about evolution and gender specifically?
Yeah.
Remember,
Yeah.
I absolutely love that conversation because I've said before and I say it again. There is no such thing as a fucking binary. It's fucking fake. That's a fucking bourgeois, fucking reactionary, classist, um, fucking myth. It's fake.
Right.
There's no such thing as a binary. Humans, it is a spectrum, and humans have
Right.
and what gender identity and what sexual orientation you are is completely different and unique to you.
Yeah, right, no doubt. Even that in the other species show that though.
Exactly. You know, yeah, literally,
It's a lot of
literally.
bisexual species. It's a lot of uh 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 homosexual, just to use that term, even though that's
Yep.
applied to us as a species, but applying it to animals, it's a lot of evidence showing all that stuff. Like all of these things, we're gonna have to break down, and it's a
Yep.
part of the class struggle. You know what I mean? Get out
You want to know
these.
a fun fact? Oh, sorry.
Well, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, not a lot of people know this, but male tigers, in order, because I remember watching a documentary about this, in order for male tigers to reproduce more effectively, they will practice engaging in, I guess the best way to say is sexual positions with amongst their siblings in order to in order to practice how to reproduce effectively, and they will do this with both their male and female siblings. Either one doesn't matter. So yeah.
Right. Didn't know that.
Yep.
Go ahead. Then we'll go to Shanti.
Yeah, I got a quick thought to interject here, going back to genetics in humans and the gender spectrum. We have been socially conditioned via the education system, teaching us a fucking lie from grade school on about, oh, well, you're either XX female or XY male. No, humans come in a lot greater variety than that. And part of this knowledge being held behind a fucking paywall of you not getting any real education in genetics unless you have the opportunity and the privilege to go to college, it backs that social bullshit of trying to condition people to that line of thinking of the binary. We have never existed as a binary. When it comes to sex chromosomes, humans also come in triple X, in XXY, XYY, quadruple X, XXXY, XXYY. There are so many polysomy recombinations of sex chromosomes that speak to gender being a spectrum, not a fucking binary. But unless you have that opportunity to take genetics courses at a college level, you don't get to fucking learn about that. So our kids are being lied to at school and told that you're either male or female. Well, no, there's a lot more to it. And that's before we even get to the point of society being more complex than that. As far as the sociological facets of gender identity, there's also factors where you could be XX and have specific tissues in your body governed by XY sex chromosomes, or the reverse of that. In every one of these things, whether it's a polysomy or having specific tissues governed by a different set of sex chromosomes, those affect your hormonal pathways. And your hormones are actually what governs your gender identity far more than just your sex chromosomes. But that combination of various sex chromosomes is what part of what builds those neural pathways with your hormones when you are in utero.
All right. I read a book called The Female Brain, where it talked about that, the neuroscience. At the back of it, it talked about lesbian women and how their brains are through the hormones form a brain that's more like a man's brain. You know what I'm saying? And these are objective facts that we can look at. You know what I mean? This ain't no theoretical nothing. This is like, and when I say theory, I ain't saying it in a derogatory way. You know what I'm saying? But this ain't something that's just imagined. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have scientific evidence that people when we're in our mother's womb, like, our brains are already being formed in a different way, in a way that might not come out the same as I might have a penis, you know what I'm saying? But if a person's brain is formed like a woman, more so in the utero, they're gonna come out more bisexual or even homosexual and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And
Precisely.
This is in study. I studied that right before I got out of prison, just to have a scientific basis to understand that and talk about this subject. You know what I mean? So yeah, you definitely right. Like, we'll probably have to read some books about that too, because this is a part of that class struggle, just so we can know the science behind some of this stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's definitely something we need to get down on and further educate people on, because I can pull up the scientific studies showing this evidence. Especially like what you were just speaking to when it comes to sexuality, like it comes down to hormonal exposure in utero from your mother's body. And that varies with every pregnancy. The studies have actually found that, say, if you have 5 sons, that in your first couple of pregnancies, the mother will have higher levels of testosterone production that the baby is being exposed to in utero than with later pregnancies with, XY children. And in the later pregnancies, there will be a higher level of estrogen production in the mother's body that change the way those neural pathways are formed, that literally directly speak to your sexuality, because that's when those neural pathways are being formed, and it's directly governed by those hormonal exposures. So like in my case, I'm a bisexual woman. Well, that tells me that when my mom was pregnant with me, that she was producing a little extra testosterone that helped form neural pathways of, guess what? This baby's going to grow up to be attracted to both men and women. Like that, it has nothing to do with choice. It's not a lifestyle.
Right.
Your neural pathways were formed when you were growing in your mother's womb.
Right. Yep. Excellent point. Shanti,
Yeah, beside it.
I see you. You got your hand up, Shanti. You'll be the last one. I know we've been on about 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
You still there?
Yep, I'm still here. This is exactly why, I'm making my school, because we are not allowed to know who we are. We're not allowed to even know, reality, because it's, they don't care about science. In a bourgeois system, they don't care about science. They care about science, trademark. That's it. It's that trademark that makes a difference. It's all about profit. It's all about teaching us lies and having us live these lies in order to get more ammunition for the bourgeois class, for the bourgeois system to continue. And that's very, very important, especially with African people, because once again, our history has been so distorted to where our gender fluidity was removed, because we were gender fluid people and we still are gender fluid people. We defy gender no matter what, but because of colonialism, because of those systems, we have been separated by these reactionary identities that have been placed on us, that have been made into a binary. in order to justify, our oppression. And you see it in the puppet state of Nigeria, the puppet state of Uganda, with the anti-homosexuality bill, with the 60 people that were just arrested at a gay wedding in southern Nigeria. You see the result. You see the result. It's the result of a certain ruling class that have control over our history, that have control over our identity, who we are. And that's very important to decolonize that, because, we're not from outer space. We're not an outer space people. We are from the cradle of life. We have tons and, hundreds and thousands of years of history with us. It's more to us than what we became 404 years ago. We're not quote unquote slaves. That's not part of our identity. We were kidnapped. We were kidnapped, and we still resisted under those conditions. New languages have been created as a result of us resisting. The Gula language, the Haitian Creole, Jamaican Patois, especially the Gula language, because a lot of people think it's just a dialect, but no, it's a language of its own. It counts. That's what a lot of us don't know. And it's also very imperative in the play of not only reclaiming our identity, but also having a class consciousness on top of it. Because, like you said, there's a difference between culture and culture with a active revolutionary scientific base to it. We cannot, we can reclaim, our African names, we can wear our, our ancestral clothes, all we want. But if we don't have that active revolutionary base to help us create a new world, then our culture is only going to be recreational and ornamental. And that's what we do not want. There cannot be cultural nationalism and a cultural revolution without active scientific revolutionary base on top of it. We have to have that base in there. And it's and once again, that's also very important, with, also learning the languages, not only learning Spanish, not only learning sign language, which is a big part of it, because once again, we're not a fixed people. Learning the language of our ancestors on top of that, learning the Taino language, learning the Ibo language, learning the Bakongo language, learning the Choctaw language, other native tongues, to be able to meet our ancestral kin at where they're at as well. Even though we have the same bloodlines, it's very important that we meet them, our ancestral peoples, where they're at, because it's been a long, hard fight to even stay, keep alive, especially up to today under this colonial system. And it's very important, especially for us of African descent, for those of African descent, to have that active class consciousness. Because if we don't, then, we're going to, culturally, nationalize ourselves to an early grave. And, that may be crazy, but that's the truth. Because without that class consciousness, we're just binarying ourselves, the Black, non-Black binary. There's no such thing as a non-Black people. We're not there's no two different types of people. Okay. We're not a binary. There's no such thing as, a binary in regards to sexuality and gender. We're not binary people. We are a fluid people. We are nature. We are 80% water. We are nature. Nature doesn't, nature, biology, and all that. We don't stay in one place. If we stayed in one place, then we would all be gone. There would be no trees, no plants, no nothing. There would be no human beings, because once again, if we were fixed, there would be nothing. So, like, this belief that we're this binary people from outer space is just absolute BS. And that's what the fascists are trying to promote to these children, especially in the state of Florida, Dino land, Seminole land, and other native groups, brainwashing the children into thinking that, climate change is just, normal patterns. You know what I'm saying? Saying that African people, learned skills when we were enslaved, and that is not true. We're not slaves, we were kidnapped. Our ancestors were kidnapped, and our names were taken. Our history was distorted, and we became a whole different type of people than what we actually were. So to be able to teach that history, to have these kinds of gatherings, to have these kinds of classes to meet where we are at collectively is very, very imperative, because once again, if we don't have that active class consciousness, if we don't quite adequately develop it, then there will be no communist world. There will be no communist society to happen unless we resist, unless we start decolonizing, unless we start becoming political. When we have revolution on our mind, then we have to do the work to make it happen, and this is one of those steps.
Power to the people. Definitely this was very informative. Like, we covered a whole lot of topics in this one right here. But yeah, man, like I agree with everything that like all of the comrades been saying. I'm gonna do it my best. Let's shoot for like by November, because I know we got a couple other things that we got to do with the Second Rainbow Coalition. But if we can have by November Spanish speaking program that people can attend, maybe twice a week, maybe we'll figure it all out. You know what I mean? I think that'd be big. I think that definitely build a whole lot of camaraderie, solidarity, and it put us in a good position where we able to relate to a lot of the different demographics in our communities, our own communities. You know what I mean? So I'm gonna definitely put that before the Second Rainbow Coalition. So hopefully we can get something like that started real soon. You know what I mean? But I enjoyed this conversation with all y'all comrades. I know Gabby's gonna be taking over Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So y'all can follow up and jump on when she has her class. But I'm gonna wish everybody a good night. I know we've been on here for 2 hours, 45 minutes almost. So but it was worthwhile. The always worthwhile conversation. With that said, all power to the people, comrades.
All power to the people.
Power to the people.
Power.
Oh, I love this. This was awesome.